Hello, I'm Bill Lazonick. I'm a professor emeritus of economics from the University of Massachusetts, and I now run a nonprofit research organization called the Academic Industry Research Network. And we do a lot of research on how business organizations can be innovative, create value. We find that when business corporations are innovative and create value, they often share the value with employees because they recognize that employees are their most important assets, and they retain those employees, they train them, but there's always a potential for innovative enterprises to be in effect captured by people who want to extract the value that they create through their innovative products for their own benefit. And this has become basically the new American disease. It's not that new, it goes back about 30 years, and it goes under the name of maximizing shareholder value. So there's an ideology that really became widespread in the United States from the mid-1980s, and in effect seduced a lot of top executives, in fact virtually all top executives, to repeat this mantra of why they run companies for shareholders, because they get rewarded on the basis of stock-based pay. So the bulk of the pay of top executives and what gets them tens of millions of dollars, sometimes even hundreds of millions of dollars a year is their stock-based pay, and if they get the stock price up, they get more money. Now, to get the stock price up, they are increasingly issuing investments in innovative products, investing for the future, and extracting the value that was created in the past by taking it away from workers and also from taxpayers by arguing for lower tax rates. And the way they get their profits up is by suppressing wages, by offshoring production, by selling off assets. But the profits are up doesn't get these top executives the increased pay. It's actually, and the stock price up, it's distributing that cash to shareholders in the form of dividends and stock buybacks. So dividends are a traditional way in which you give a yield to households that have shares and want some income from them. But stock buybacks are on top of that, and there are trillions of dollars over the, let's say, the last decade for the S&P 500, the largest company who do the bulk of these stock buybacks, $4 trillion, over half of their net income. And on top of that, you'll have another $3 trillion in dividends, comes to about 94% of their net income in total. That is just being gushing out of the companies. And now where is it going? It's largely going to the small proportion of the population who hold shares. About 10% of the population have about 84% of the shares. And particularly in the case of stock buybacks, it's going to professional traders, stock traders, who have the information and the ability to time the sale of shares, because it's basically you're manipulating the stock price, getting the stock price up. The executives make money from higher gains on stock options and stock awards, and Wall Street bankers and hedge fund managers make money from the timing of the buying and selling of shares, in which they have the information that everybody else doesn't have. And this is basically, I've called it the looting of the industrial corporation. And what it's doing, I would argue, it's the main driver of two things that most people recognize about the performance of the American economy, which of course people look to as, in many cases, as an exemplar of how you run a capitalist economy. Increasing concentration of income among the richest households, which has become more and more extreme. And it's many of these executives and hedge fund managers, Wall Street bankers are among them. And the erosion of middle-class employment opportunities. So even in the best of companies, often most of the jobs are not very well paid. I can just give you one example. Amazon, which is, I would say, still an innovative company, does not do stock buybacks, is boosting its stock price by its competitive products, and particularly through its investment in web services. It's the largest spender on R&D in the United States. But over the last 5 years, it's increased its employment from 88,000 people to 566,000 people. That's the end of 2017. That's a lot of people. But almost all those people are people who are doing very low wage work in the distribution centers of the millions of products that Amazon sells on its website, delivery of those products. They're basically people who are on-demand workers like Uber drivers. And so you don't have good employment for most people in that company. And recently, under rules that came out of the Dodd-Frank Act of 2010, companies report the wage of their CEO in relation to the median wage of their workers. And at Amazon, it's the median wage of their employees, these 566,000 employees worldwide, I should say, is about $28,000, which by American standards is not, is really close to a poverty level. So even the best companies, even if they're not what I call downsize and distribute companies, getting rid of employees, paying out lots of money to shareholders, which is the case of Amazon, are taking the presence of a kind of a degraded labor market, a market where most companies are doing that and have shed particularly workers with high school educations, and they're taking advantage of that to get lots and lots, hundreds of thousands of people at very, very cheap labor. So they're not creating for most people a prosperous economy, and that's even the best of them. And the worst of them are just simply taking all their profits and paying it out to shareholders. I'll just end by saying an example in which we're working, do a lot of research on and has a lot of impact on people is the pharmaceutical companies that in the United States have unregulated prices, unlike most countries of the world. Charge at least twice as much for pharmaceutical drugs as anywhere else in the world, and have said for decades that they need the high drug prices to invest more in R&D and more innovation. They get $30 billion a year of support from the government, from the National Institutes of Health. But if you look at those companies, Merck, Pfizer in particular, some of the big pharma companies, they're distributing by decade, over 100% of their profits in stock dividends and buybacks. So they don't need the high prices. All they're doing with those high prices is getting high stock prices. They're not, in fact, and they're becoming less and less innovative over time. So that's only part of the story of what's really devastating, I think, the U.S. economy. Even though it seems to be prosperous right now, it's not really prosperous because of this.